Our top story tonight. It could have been Aryan Khan. It might have been the Savarkar debate, but it is an issue that should concern each and every one of us. An issue that gets distracted in the noise of politics around us. Fuel prices are on fire, burning every few days a bigger hole in the pockets of millions of Indians. Petrol and diesel prices well above rupees 100 in several cities across the country. The fact is, whether it's the centre with its excise duties or state governments with their own tax structure, the Aam Aadmi's budget is being badly hit. For the middle class, there will be, as a result, a little less festive cheer in this season. The big question that we need to now ask our policy makers: what are they going to do to ensure that there is some rationality brought to the fuel price escalation? Before we get into that, here's our top story tonight.
Petrol and diesel prices hiked once again. While petrol was already selling at more than 100 rupees a litre, now diesel too has crossed the 100 mark in many cities including Mumbai. In Kolkata and Chennai, diesel is inching towards the 100 mark. India Today reporters hit the ground across the country to see how the spiralling fuel prices have hit people at large. In Bhopal, we met Arif, who has landed a job after a long gap due to the pandemic. The high fuel prices are making it harder for him to make ends meet.
नौकरी बड़ी मुश्किल से लगी है और तनख्वाहें कम हो गई हैं, महंगाई इतनी ज़्यादा हो गई है कि घर का बजट टोटल गड़बड़ा गया है.
Petrol in Rajasthan's capital Jaipur sells at more than 116 rupees per litre. Deepak, a businessman in the city, has now shifted to using his old scooty as paying for petrol is affecting his monthly budget.
मैं कार हैंडल करता था, अब कार से टू व्हीलर पे आ गया हूँ. अभी गवर्नमेंट सपोर्ट कर रही है ईवी को, लेकिन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक व्हीकल के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कहाँ है?
Cab drivers in Kolkata had started to see an increase in passengers after the pandemic-induced lockdown. They fear the rising fuel prices will hurt their incomes.
The prices of petrol and diesel have been rising over months, and ever since it had touched the 100 rupee per litre mark, people were wondering whether to really use their private vehicles or go in for the option of using the public transport.
First the pandemic, and now the skyrocketing fuel prices have hit the public sentiment. This year too, there may be no festive cheer for the middle class. Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's raise the questions tonight that need to be answered. Fuel on fire. Is there any control over the prices, or will they keep surging? Remember, global prices are also rising in the last few days. Is the government serious about trying to even contain fuel prices, or they simply want to use fuel for revenues? Should the government be subsidizing fuel? Is a cut on taxes both at the centre and at the state on fuel the only way out? Will these rising fuel prices hit inflation, hit growth, and in general create a situation of feel bad? Just some of the questions we will raise tonight. We have a political face-off at the very start. Nalin Kohli, BJP's spokesperson, and Supriya Srinath is the Congress's spokesperson. I appreciate both of you joining us. I want to request both of you as little cross-talk as possible, but let's cut the chase and come to the core of it. The core of it, Nalin Kohli, is that the fact is that fuel prices have been on fire now for more than a year. In 2012, when Prime Minister Modi was then in the opposition, he said, massive hike in petrol prices is a prime example of the failure of Congress-led UPA. This will put a burden of hundreds of crores. Now the shoe is on the other foot. Will you concede it's easier to be in the opposition than in the government? You are not budging on your demand, on your insistence that excise duties will not be cut. Prices continue to rise. It has very little increasingly to do with global prices, but to do with the government's intention to use fuel to boost revenues. Am I correct or not?
No, I would not agree that you're correct. Firstly, fuel prices in the recent past, over the last 1 year, have gone up from as low as $20 to $84. and currently in the last run from about $52 per barrel to $84. So therefore, fuel prices are rising. That's part one. Part two, it's easy to be in government also if you follow the UPA approach of the Congress, which is simply you mortgage the future by issuing oil bonds of 1,40,000 crores, as they did between 2005 and 2010, and let a future generation pay the burden. It's not very complicated. You pick up a loan, somebody has to pay it. You pay it after 10 years, so after 10 years, somebody has to pay it. So that's one approach. It could have been done when UPA government was there to bite the bullet and say that we will link it to the market. So the Modi government has linked it to the market. That's the second part. So therefore, it's now, in a sense, uncontrolled, decontrolled. It's not part of GST. Three, it's incorrect to also say that the central government is the beneficiary of the entire tax, because about some 31 or 41% of it goes to the state. States have their own VAT also, because states also need revenue. So any Congress state, or if a Congress party says that, why is the price so high? Well, reduce your state tax if you feel you can manage without the money. At the central level, the funds are important. Let's not forget, we have gone through a pandemic. The economy has been stressed. It's showing some very good green shoots. With regard to it, 80 crore people have been getting under Prime Minister Modi's government ration. It's unprecedented. There's free vaccination for 135 crore people. That's unprecedented. It's being all borne. Revenues have cut down because of the pandemic, but economic activity will come. But if you say there's a case to be built for subsidizing it, then it needs to be thought, because should you subsidize fuel and remove and increase the subsidy burden where it should be on issues related to agriculture, on fertilizers and other things that require? So these are large questions, no easy answers, but the Modi government is willing to take those.
I will come one by one to all the points you made. I allowed you uninterrupted, sir. I allowed you to, but there are questions even on oil bonds, because the issue has been for the longest time used by you to justify what you're doing. But the fact is the oil bond burden is no longer of the nature that it requires such high taxes. You have claimed global oil prices as a reason, but the fact is even when global oil prices were relatively calm, you still continue to increase fuel prices. Where you are perhaps making a stronger point is the fact that state governments too, through their taxes and their VAT system, have also increased their taxation to put the burden on the Aam Aadmi. Now, Supriya Shinde, why don't you respond? Because tali do haath se bachti hai. 32% excise, 32 rupees per litre excise burden put by the centre, but state governments are also refusing, barring one or two, to bring down taxes on fuel.
I first want to debunked some of the theories that have been put forward. To just put some numbers in perspective. This whole oil ad nauseum by you and central government alone has collected 23 lakh crore rupees by increasing excise duty 13 times in its total tenure since 2014. You have so far paid 71,198 crore in oil bonds, which is 3.5% of only your share, not the total share. Your share, 23 lakh crore rupees. That's the first theory that needs to be debunked. 3.5% is all that you paid on oil bonds, so please do not go after oil bonds. The second important point, when you say state, no, that's a faulty argument, and I'll tell you why. The 13 times excise duty was raised, it was not raised for states as well. Basic excise is shared between the central and the state government. The component of the excise that has been raised repeatedly is special and additional excise, which the centre alone keeps for itself. So I will give you just one example. In 2014, on every litre of diesel that was sold, the excise that was getting to the central government was 2 rupees 14 paisa, and to the state government 1 rupee 14 paisa. Now the excise that the central government is getting on every litre of diesel sold is 31 rupees 6 paisa and 74 paisa only going to the state government. It's a similar picture for petrol as well. 32 rupees 33 paisa on every litre of petrol for the central government, 57 paisa alone for the state government. The states have very limited elbow room as far as the fiscal space is concerned. We've all seen how the experiment with the GST and an ill-timed, ill-executed GST has caused dearly. State funds have been squeezed, And which is why petroleum and alcohol continue to be the only revenue stream. It is very faulty and it's a fallacy to presume that the state can cut taxes, but the elbow room is actually with the central government to reduce taxation.
But what Supriya Srined, you're saying that the real elbow room to perhaps cut duties or cut excise lies with the centre. However, I can point out, for example, a Congress-ruled state like Rajasthan, which has levied a 36% duty on petrol. 1,500 kilometer a road cess is also there. You can look at all your states. I look at all of them. Maharashtra 26% plus 10.12 litres has been added. Look at all the states that are there, except to some extent Tamil Nadu, which has actually cut duties. None of the states where there are opposition governments are willing to cut their duties as well. So while you blame the centre, do you also concede at one level that maybe the states could provide some relief?
I will tell you, I am not playing a blame game here. This is a federal structure. The central government has sequestered a large part of the fuel taxes. It collected 4 lakh crore rupees on fuel taxes in the last financial year alone, which was more than the income and the corporate tax, the central government's share I'm talking about. And which is why I believe the revenue stream for the states is very limited. And from that limited stream, they are getting revenue through fuel and through alcohol. It is very faulty to presume they should compromise their very limited revenue streams, whereas the central government is not going to do that. I also want to point out here, the prices of CNG, of PNG, of edible oil, of pulses, of sugar, of coffee, of tea, of everything has gone up. If you actually ask me, I'm joining the show from Maharashtra. For 1 litre of edible oil, a farmer has to sell 14 kgs of wheat. For a month's supply of edible oil, a farmer has to sell 1 quintal of wheat. That is how big the disparity is. This disparity can alone be addressed by the huge revenue that the central government has amassed from fuel taxation.
Okay, Nalin Kohli, before you respond, listening to what the Minister of State for Petroleum said. He was asked this specific question about why wasn't the centre looking to at least provide some relief. This is what Mr. Theli had to say. Listen in.
पेट्रोल दाम बेसि নহয় टैक्स लगवा থাকে আপোনালোক নিশ্চয় ভ্যাকসিন লৈছে এই ভ্যাকসিনৰ পইচাবিলাক কৰবা আহিব আপোনালোকতো দিয়া নাই ভ্যাকসিনৰ পইচা নিশ্চয় এই ভ্যাকসিনৰ পইচাবিলাক তেনে ধৰণে ৰাখা আজি আমি কৈছো পানীহে দাম বেছি তেলতকৈ মই কৈছো ট্যাক্স লগৱাছ
the argument being made is we are providing you free vaccines, so please stuff it. Please pay extra for petrol and diesel. That's, that is a very flawed argument that is being made, Nalin Kohli, by the minister in the first place. The free vaccines were budgeted in the budget. There was a specific budget. Why is it? The numbers are absolutely right. 23 lakh crores since 2014 has been obtained by the centre through revenues on fuel. 4 lakh crores in the last month. You don't need free vaccines, has nothing to do with that. You are using it for schemes, basically, possibly, to push your political agenda.
So I hope you'll be liberal in letting me speak in terms of time, given how much we've heard from Supriya ji and you. And I'm sure we will not need to then indulge in cross-talk. Let's address each of it. This 23 lakh crore figure, and let me take an assumption that Supriya ji is correct, because I don't have any reason to believe that she would come with a manipulated figure, is not going into anyone's pocket. This is going into the development of India. So let's pick a few develops, and I'll answer your question too also, Raj. I'm not running away from any question. So let's go down to economics. Let me give you an example. As the Prime Minister just yesterday only in his speech pointed out, between 1947 and 1987, we added 15,000 kilometers of pipeline for gas. And now 16,000 kilometers are already under construction in the last 7 years. Let's take railways. 3,000 kilometers of railways was done only in terms of electrification in the preceding 7 years of the UPA government. 24,000 kilometers has been done in the last 7 years of Narendra Modi. Let's take another thing. 60 villages, 60 villages in the whole country were optical fiber connected under the UPA. 1,50,000 villages are connected by optical fiber. This money is going to develop India. States benefit as much as anybody else. The center is not where the action takes place. The action is the states, and that's exactly
further. When you say this is about political schemes,
Yes.
12 crore farmers receive 6,000 rupees per year from the as a direct transfer into their account. That is not a political scheme. That helps them come out of the debt trap because they needed that money on a regular basis.
So you're telling me that the middle class consumer must pay more for fuel. You're telling me the middle class consumer must now pay more for fuel because that is the only way you can fund these schemes. Am I correct?
Sorry, there will be crosstalk because I won't hear the question. I will finish what I have to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my connection. Give me a moment, Rajdeep.
Okay, I'll give you a moment. Supriya Shrineth, you want to respond? This is the argument which is consistently being made. You heard the minister, you've heard Nalin Kohli, the Prime Minister makes this argument that if we have to use Nalin Kohli's words, develop India, provide for these various schemes, Kisan Samman, other schemes, we need to raise revenues. Fuel is one way to do so.
Absolutely flawed argument. Absolutely fallacious argument, and I'll tell you why. The farmers that they speak about who are being given the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, the cost of agriculture has gone up by over 15,000 rupees per hectare because of costly diesel, because of costly fertilizers, because of costly pesticides. So you're giving them with one hand, but actually taking a lot more away from them. आप 6,000 रुपये दे रहे हैं, आपने 15,000 रुपये प्रति हेक्टेयर cost of agriculture बढ़ा दिया है. I also want to point out CNG prices going up by 4 rupees 56 paisa and PNG going up by 4 rupees 20 paisa. Hurts the aam aadmi. Please remember, inflation, high cost of fuel is cascading. It results in high prices of vegetables, fruits, eggs, milk, pulses, edible oil, everything. It's the main transport fuel. When are you going to understand that? It's very inflationary. Inflation actually hurts the common, the poor man the most than the rich. All these schemes you're giving to the common, you're actually taking away. I also have one thing to say in the last 10 seconds of my argument, and this has to come from a certain insensitive quarter of the government. The finance minister turns around and says, "मैं प्याज लहसुन नहीं खाती." The minister here who we heard said, "पानी की बोतल इतनी महंगी है." तो आप आम आदमी की कमर तोड़िएगा. Remember, this inflation is different because the real rate of growth has also come down, which means wages are lower, which means jobs have been lost. And to break the back of people with high prices at a time like this, if you ask me, it's not even economic. It's of course wrong. It's sinful, but it's not even economic.
Supriya Shrineth, let's be honest, because of unseasonal rainfall in some parts of India, vegetable prices have been hit, especially tomatoes. It's not necessarily to do with government policy. So we should, there needs to be fact check on all what you're saying. Some of it, vegetable prices, let's be clear.
Onion prices from 30 rupees to 50 rupees.
We don't believe you can we have no problem. You are complete what I was saying last week.
Yeah, just a minute, Nalin. Just a minute.
I'm giving you prices. Arhar dal from 70 to 150. Masoor from 65 to 120. सरसों का तेल जो खाने में इस्तेमाल होता है वो 90 रुपए का बिक रहा था, 250 रुपए प्रति लीटर बिक रहा है. Sugar from 35 to 50. Chana from 60 to 80. Do you think this doesn't hurt the common man?
Okay, let me actually ask the common man. We asked the common man. We sent our reporters out on the street to ask the common man whether it was hurting vegetable prices, in particularly the tomato. Listen into what they said.
जो चीज 100 रुपए की मिलती है आज वो 250 रुपए मिल रही है. किसी भी आइटम में ले लो, कोई आइटम कम रेट में नहीं है. तो इसमें गरीब आदमी, आम आदमी बेचारा क्या करेगा? आज देख रहे हो, आज लोगों ने कह दिया कि साहब मैंने 3 बच्चों की हत्या करके खुद भी आत्महत्या कर ली. उसका कारण क्या है? यही कारण है.
अभी गिरेक नहीं चलने पे वही माल हम लोग को कम रेट में बेचना पड़ता है और गरीब तबके के लोग ले नहीं पा रहे तो भाजी उन लोग को दे देना पड़ता है. नुकसान होने से अच्छा किसी का पेट भर जाए.
लोकल में 80 रुपए हो जाएंगे, ये जो मंडी में है 60 रुपए किलो.
तो ये क्यों महंगा हुआ है?
अब क्या मालूम, पेट्रोल डीजल से महंगा हुआ.
The charge, Nalin Kohli, is that there's a lack of sensitivity. How do you respond? This was made by Supriya Shrineth. It's made by critics of the government. That there is a lack of sensitivity when prices rise. Respond, please.
Well, actually, I will not worry too much about what Supriya says because as far as the Congress party is, that's their approach. she's only as a spokesperson entitled to put out what her party's view is. So you may say it's lack of sensitivity. I will say it's a lack of sensibility also. Because that's how we create the Congress party's approach has been. And we only have to see how we always on a daily basis spar on it. So that's okay. That's part of the political discourse and healthy democracy, and we can live with that. I think the more serious issue is the fundamental issue. Of course, it's not as if we are celebrating a price rise. This government is not. But I'm also pointing out that the government's priorities are in the right place. This government is not shortchanging Indians. This government is not in corruption wiping out crores of rupees. There's not a single scam in this government. This government, as I was pointing out under Modi, has been doing development before my audio and my visual broke away. And when you were talking about the minister was merely making a point. He's not specific to the issue of only vaccine. He's making a point that, look, we are providing all these things. There is a pandemic. We are still not out of it fully. And we insist that responsibility falls on us. But this is a government that's working for those segments that where it matters most. Otherwise, why would you give free ration for 80 crore people continuing right up to Diwali? So that's the second year in a row.
Let me take the point you're taking to Supriya Shinde one last time, because Supriya Shinde, the difference we see between 2011, 12, 13, when inflation was in double digits, when the Congress was in or UPA was in power, to today, we don't see a large public outcry. We don't see an outrage. Maybe you could argue the media is not capturing it, but even the political parties have not, whether you like it or not, been able to capture it in a way to put the government on the mat. Is it, as Nalin Kohli is saying, because people are willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the government that, for example, fuel revenues are being used to plow back into the system for welfare schemes? Or is it simply, perhaps, that there's a credibility factor between the Modi government and the UPA government at the time? How do you respond to the fact that we don't see any anger, in a way, at the fact that prices are rising?
Rajdeep, with all due respect to a profession I have the highest regard for, which is journalism, I wish there were more TV shows like the one that we are participating in now. I wish there were larger sections of the media that were putting this to the government, that were asking tough questions of the government, and that were actually voicing the opinion of the people. I am in a part of Uttar Pradesh which is called Maharajganj. I travelled from Lucknow and Sitapur and Lakhimpur, and I was in Varanasi. I keep speaking to people wherever I go, whether it's cab drivers or common people who may not know me. And a lot of them, there is such inherent anger within the people as far as price rise is concerned. You know why they don't talk? Because they're very scared of the regime. You never know what hits you next if you make your opinion public. But these people are going to be the ones who will vote this government out. And I can tell you, they believe that if you speak your opinion, if you're transparent with your opinion, आपको देशद्रोही कर दिया जाएगा, आपके खिलाफ मुकदमा हो जाएगा, आपको पुलिस आकर धर पकड़ देगी, इसलिए लोग बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. लेकिन लोग बहुत परेशान है साहब इससे. लोग बहुत परेशान है जिस तरह से महंगाई बढ़ रही है. लोगों के वेतन घट गए, नौकरी चली गई है, और उसके बाद
So you're saying that the media has failed to in a way capture the anger. The anger is there on the ground. Final word, Nalin Kohli. You know, look at it when film stars at the time were tweeting saying we'll have to cycle during the Manmohan Singh time when prices were rising.
Petrol is at 110. The same film stars.
Just a minute, ma'am. Now, just a minute. There was anger, there was visible anger, social media or in parliament, outside parliament. The Prime Minister himself, then of course opposition leader Mr. Modi, said that the government had completely failed. Now, what's happened? No one wants to cycle to work, Nalin Kohli.
So, Rajdeep, I think, you know, in your question to Supriya, that was a fair comment. And why is there no anger? And is there a benefit of doubt that's to be given to the credibility of a government that's working? And I think that hits it bang on. This is a government that is working, as simple as that. This is a government that's not cheating or shortchanging the common man. So therefore, people are looking at it that the money where it should be spent is going. It's not going to line up some personal pockets, as we have seen in the past. Second, that with regards to, yes, Supriya is entitled as every political person from the lowest Karyakarta to all of us. We are also Karyakartas. When we go out, we meet and we take public reaction. But yes, Supriya is entitled to believe that the Congress is going to sweep, and so be it. They can be entitled, but if there was such an anger, we wouldn't be winning elections, we would be losing elections.
What I was hoping to get from this show was a solution, which we don't seem to be having, which means that prices will continue to lie. Okay, you want your 10 seconds, Supriya? 10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Can I please comment, Rajdeep? 10 seconds. Rajdeep, please 10 seconds. The same film stars, if they were to speak today, will be facing the music of ED, CBI and income tax. and which is why they don't talk. People who talk in this country today are called anti-nationals, which is why they are not speaking.
Okay.
You think 110 rupee petrol doesn't have
Okay, we've reached.
You really are living in a la-la land.
Okay, we've reached the end. You know, that when we start talking about anti-national, even in the context of fuel, then we have problems. But clearly, we need to hear voices. And voices from below are saying there are voices who are troubled by the rising price. And I hope that our netas appreciate and respect those voices rather than believe that there is no visible disquiet. I won't use the word anger, disquiet over the continuously rising fuel prices in particular.